Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm grateful that you have chosen to give me a little bit of your time today as I talk about some more personal issues. I'm actually kind of nervous about doing this video because it's just not very comfortable for me to talk about my disability and that sort of thing, but I feel like I owe an explanation to my viewers as to why I really don't do very much board gaming content anymore, when for the first couple of years of my channel that was kind of the main focus. I mainly did board gaming related content, and then every so often when I finished reading a book I would do a book video on the side, as well as a little bit of stuff about music and other interests here and there. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, I don't think any of this is really going to be new to you. I think most of this is stuff that I've brought up in other videos here and there, and it's just things that have naturally come up as I share parts of my life with you. But let's get into how my disabilities have pretty much killed my board gaming hobby. When people think of the topic of disabilities, I think it's natural to think of somebody in a wheelchair. I think that tends to be the image that pops into our head when the word disability comes up. And if not a wheelchair specifically, I think some kind of physical limitations are what tends to come to mind. And so the fact that my own disabilities are not visible disabilities makes things pretty uncomfortable for me to talk about. In a sense, I often feel like an imposter, like, how dare I call myself disabled when I can walk and generally have access to all my physical functions? And in my own head, I'm questioning myself. I'm saying, am I just lazy? What's my problem? Why can't I function as kind of a regularly functioning human? So even for me with my own identity, it's tough for me to wrap my head around all of this, but I'm going to get into the situation, and I don't know, hopefully I can find some kind of acceptance with myself and the situation I find myself in here. So when we're talking about my board gaming hobby, back in the old days, I used to have at least a couple of different friend groups who were board gamers, and a lot of our getting together and having fun together was centered around the hobby of board gaming. I used to go out to local board game conventions, and I did that often enough that I would sort of meet some of the same people from convention to convention, and I would got to know people and befriend them, and every time I went to a convention I'd seek them out to play some games with them. And so there were various groups of people who I did hang out with and I got to spend a lot of time playing games with. Now, I've always had health problems right from a very young age. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at age 12, although I had been sick for years prior to that and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. So I've had Crohn's disease for pretty much my whole life. And then from the mental health side of things, definitely at least the groundwork for PTSD was laid during my childhood when I was kind of abused by my dad growing up and was bullied by my peers at school and things like that. So there's always been a certain amount of depression and mental health issues since childhood as well. So health problems have been a part of my life for pretty much my whole life. But the first major domino fell some years back when I could no longer work. I was working as an advanced care paramedic in Toronto, and even though I had had some pretty serious health problems and one major surgery for the Crohn's disease, I had managed to kind of push through it. And I always thought that I was the type of person who, no matter what I faced, I could just, if I just put my mind to it, I could push through it and keep functioning and doing what I wanted to do. And that was the case for much of my life, until I finally reached a point where my doctor had been bugging me for a long time, saying, you really need to step away from your job and focus on your health a bit. And I had been resistant, and I really kept resisting that until it came to the point where I could no longer do it. And that was in part due to the physical health problems caused by Crohn's disease, which are generally kind of chronic pain, diarrhea, chronic fatigue. Those are sort of the main symptoms that I deal with the Crohn's. But then the PTSD really reared its head as soon as I had children of my own. As soon as I had my first boy, basically all of the dead babies and dead kids I dealt with as a paramedic in Toronto really caused something to snap in my brain, and the whole PTSD came flooding out at that point. And like I said, there was groundwork that had been laid with the abuse of my childhood, as well as with living with chronic pain and having at least one near-death experience with the Crohn's disease. Those had also sort of laid a foundation for the PTSD. But it wasn't until I had kids of my own that the horrible things I dealt with at work really came flooding into my head, and something really broke in my brain, to be honest with you. At the point that I could no longer work and I ended up on disability, I started also spending less time in crowds of strangers. So I kind of stopped going to board game conventions. And one, at least small reason for that, is the fact that when you meet somebody new, when you're in an environment like a convention or a house party or whatever it is, and you meet a new person, what's the first thing that somebody asks you when they meet you other than your name? They say, "So what do you do?" And as somebody on disability, that has become an extremely humiliating question to deal with, because, well, on paper, I'm still employed as a paramedic in Toronto. The fact is, I don't do anything. I am basically a stay-at-home dad at this point, and I collect disability, and it's embarrassing for me to admit that I just sit at home and I collect free payments for my disability. It's an awkward and humiliating situation to be in, and as a result, I don't like to meet new people because I don't like to deal with these questions when they come up. Added to that is the fact that the PTSD itself makes it hard for me to be in an environment of a lot of people I don't know and don't trust. There's a ton of social anxiety that comes with the PTSD, and so as a result, I just started to stick with just my friend groups. But even those, as the years went on and my disability continued and even got worse as time went by, I found myself really self-isolating. Over time, I let a lot of my friendships that were important to me kind of fall by the wayside. And my friend group kind of got smaller and smaller as time went by, and I increasingly isolated myself and just kind of lived within my own head. So I guess the second domino to fall were my friend groups, and eventually I was down to just one very small, kind of one other family who I would still get together with on a regular basis to play games with. These were people who were like family to me. They were my chosen family, really. They were the people who were like my own siblings, and we did get together a lot and we played a lot of games. Before I get into the very worst aspect of this story, let me pause for a second on a positive note and give a really huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, in particular to my higher tier supporters, Joanna, Paul, Mojo Dam, and I have a brand new supporter, Asmanda's Perfect. So thank you to all of you. A huge special thank you to Asmanda's Perfect for your support, for coming on board and being there to support me. It just means the world to me, and I'm so excited to have somebody else coming along with me on my journey through Patreon. If you're interested in doing so too, for as little as $2 a month, you can kind of sign up to my Patreon and have access to a couple of Patreon-only videos and that sort of thing. So I would welcome you to come aboard if you're interested in doing that. Now, getting into the real rough stuff. And again, it's stuff I've talked about before because it is kind of a big part of my past couple of years. So as my mental health continued to sort of get worse and worse over time, I just increasingly isolated myself, like I said, sort of withdrew into myself. And I thought that by doing so, I was protecting my wife, that by not expressing my pain, my trauma, the difficult things I was dealing with, I was saving my wife from dealing with all that stuff. But the reality is I was shutting her out of my life and really ignoring her needs and not doing my part as a husband. And ultimately, my wife chose to leave me in February of 2020. And in support of her, that last group of friends, those people who were my chosen family, decided to also cease contact with me and no longer have anything to do with me. So, in one fell swoop, I sort of lost the people I loved the most. But those people were also kind of the last board gaming people that I hung out with. So as a result, I have all these games on my shelves collecting dust that really haven't been played since February of 2020. I do get a little bit of tabletop gaming in now with a couple of different people. I do have one person who's become a very good friend to me, who we play Magic at the Gathering on a pretty regular basis. And then there's another kind of group that I've gotten involved with that plays D&D. We play over Zoom. And in fact, the people, or the friend who I play Magic with, has convinced me to start playing D&D with him and a couple of people he knows, and to actually DM for them. So that's going to be starting up in a couple of weeks, actually. So there's a little bit of tabletop gaming happening in the form of Magic and D&D, but as far as board gaming in general goes, it just straight up hasn't been happening. Now, what has really helped to save me and my channel here is the fact that shortly after my life really fell apart in February of last year, I discovered BookTube, and I started finding all these booktubers and watching them regularly and following what they do, and I started doing a lot more reading on my own too. So in the absence of being able to play games, I guess my focus shifted more towards books and reading, and I started to post a lot more about books and reading on my channel rather than board games. I'm not going to totally abandon board gaming. I do have ideas for other videos that I would love to keep talking about when it comes to board games, but my primary focus at this point is books and the BookTube side of things. I'm very grateful that that's there and that I do have that to talk about, and that I do still have something positive to focus on. My whole goal of this channel has been to talk about positive things, hobby-related things, things that make me happy, that are fun to talk about, and just provide a bit of a positive distraction, I hope, for my viewers, something that they can watch and enjoy and sort of forget about their own day-to-day life for a few minutes at a time. So that, in a nutshell, is how my disability issues ended up killing my board gaming hobby. Obviously, it is very much the mental health side of things that kind of took this hobby away from me. The physical side of things were a bit of an issue when it came to going out to play games at cafes or conventions. Because of the Crohn's disease, I always had to make sure I was close to a bathroom, and it was hard to keep up my energy levels throughout a weekend of convention gaming, for instance. So there were physical sides to the disability that affected my game playing as well, but those were things I was generally able to work around with the help of medications and that sort of thing. But the mental health side of the disability is the main factor in the death of this hobby for me. So going forward, do I expect to play games some more again eventually? I don't know. It's really hard for me to meet new people, like I alluded to previously. There's just so much shame in being on disability when it comes to introducing myself to people and getting to know them. There's at least one friend from my past board gaming life who I would really love to reconnect with and maybe start to play games with again at some point. My kids, as they get older, have shown less interest in board games. We used to play quite a bit when they were younger, but now that they're sort of 10 and 11, they're getting to an age where they would just rather be out playing with their friends, which is fine. I mean, for their own development, I think it's just as important for them to be social and hanging out with friends as it is to be kind of hanging out with me and playing games and stuff. Both of these things are important, but I'm happy for them that they can enjoy being out with friends and having fun. So maybe when they're a bit older, they'll come back to the board gaming side of things. Who knows? But yeah, in the meantime, I have a lot of anxiety with meeting new people, so it's hard for me to imagine getting connected with like a local game group again when the pandemic stuff starts to clear up. On the other hand, the idea of getting out to a board game convention when those start happening in Canada again does sound appealing, just because honestly, one problem I've been experiencing since February of last year is a lot of loneliness with kind of having my loved ones no longer in my life. feel like it would be nice somehow to connect with people. How that happens with the things that I'm dealing with, I don't really know, but maybe when conventions start up, I'll get back out again to a board game convention at some point. Really, who knows what the future holds? I certainly couldn't have imagined I'd be in this place 10 years ago. But for you who were following me primarily for the board gaming content, I do apologize, and I really am sorry that I've ended up in this situation where I haven't been able to keep bringing you that content. And I can only hope you enjoy reading as much as I do. But no matter what the reason you're here, I'm just really grateful to have you. The fact that I still have this YouTube channel and people who are willing to watch it means that I still have a reason to get out of bed every day and get things done and not totally succumb to the depression that's constantly threatening to take me down. So I am so grateful for you. Just by being here and watching my videos, you are supporting me in a difficult time. So it means the world to me. I sure do appreciate you. Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really proud of the... Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really proud of the work I put into making this video, and I would be the world to... And... But let's get into generally physically function in a when I could no longer lurk a bit of a hopefully there's